Welcome to Olympian Cares, giving you the best in water testing and analysis. Today we're looking at the New York Times, where most New York City schools had high lead levels. Retest fine. And this is very, very scary because young children can especially be affected by lead. It can affect their developmental years, it can also affect their learning, and it can cause organ failure and other problems such as death in extreme cases. This is something that needs to be noted, and people who have seen this are warning about it. Last year, with fears about lead poisoning running high in the wake of the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, New York City officials said that they had tested the water in the city's public schools and that the results should be reassuring. Only 1% of outlets had lead above the Environmental Protection Agency's action level of 15 parts per billion. But there is still an issue here. But after the New York Times reported that the city had run the water in every outlet for 2 hours the night before taking the water samples, a process called flushing. So we're seeing this flushing thing quite a lot. We're seeing that they're just saying, I'm going to flush the water. Well, that's not a way to permanently solve it. That's like getting a really bad cut and then just saying, hey, I'm going to put a Band-Aid over it instead of cleaning it out and making sure that it gets professional medical attention. Same thing here. You can't just flush it. You need it periodically tested, analyzed. You need to make sure that lead is not a recurring problem. Experts say that the practice had most likely hidden the lead problems, which is even more dangerous. They say the city should throw out the results and redo the tests. In the end, the city did. On Friday, the new results were released. They paint a starkly different picture. This time, 8% of outlets had lead levels. So you remember up here, only 1% of outlets had lead levels. That looked very good. But now, when we're looking at the actual results, this is quite concerning. 8% of outlets had lead levels above 15 parts per billion. In the vast majority of school buildings, 83% had at least one outlet with a lead level above the threshold. So this is getting quite dangerous in New York City. 2 schools in Queens were among the worst for the number of outlets involved as well, for looking at that. In public schools, 95, the Eastwood School in Jamaica, which has 1,500 students, 34 outlets had lead levels above the EPA's threshold. And a water fountain in the cafeteria had a level of 3,200 parts per billion. Several had other water fountains in the cafeteria. A play area, school hallway, had lead levels more than 40 times the EPA action level. So now that we're actually seeing the real results, this is quite concerning. This is quite dangerous to the children who are part of these schools, and they don't even know it because they might not even be able to see, taste, or detect the lead from any discharge. And once they start to drink it, it'll affect their developmental years. So this is something to be extremely concerned about. When the school was tested the first time under the protocol that include flushing, the highest level was found at 35 parts per billion. So these are huge. The city's education department said every outlet where a sample exceeded the threshold had been turned off. So they are taking action there and would be turned on again only after it was replaced and new tests found below 15 parts per billion. And new cases of lead poisoning among children in New York City have significantly declined in the past decade, but the water still needs tested and analyzed to make sure that's consistent. And the city's health department investigates cases of lead poisoning in children, and the education department said there had never been a known case of lead poisoning traced to drinking water in schools. That being said, there's still some issues with the flushing here. There's still a lot of issues where the actual tests show 8% of outlets as opposed to 1% of outlets. So it's always a good idea, especially schools, especially in places where there's children, to periodically test your water and have it analyzed for lead and other heavy metals.